one of our videos. So get Node.js Express, which is pretty awesome. We've put your site up on Heroku at this point. We've installed Angular, and now we're working to get all the features working for the front-end framework. Last week, we took care of the bookstore shopping cart. We added bookstore items, and we were able to filter those items by author. This week, we're going to start by making a details view for the shopping cart. And that's what we're going to do by the end of this video. All right, let's get going. I've made a copy of the week 9 or week 8 project, and I've called it week 9. This project is starting to get big, and if you notice in the code, completed code archive, that should be up on eCentennial, that the project is at least, well, let's say over 110 megabytes, which is pretty big for a web application. Why is it big? It's big because of all the node modules. So there's node modules out here, and there's node modules in here. So a lot of times, this is why we don't include node modules when we put the project up on GitHub, because it's just really large for mostly no reason. So in our gitignore file, you can see that we are going to ignore node modules when we do put this up on GitHub again. And that means node modules on the outside and node modules on the inside. What that also is going to mean is that when you download a project, when that's happening from GitHub, if you do, and if we put a gitignore file in here with node modules, which means you're going to have to do an npm install. If you issue an npm install on the command line, it will download and install all the node modules as per the package.json manifest. So for example, if there wasn't a node modules folder, and if I did an npm install, and you should know this by now, then all these packages will be installed in the exact to the exact version number or higher than we have here. Okay, so let's see where we are right now, where we are so far. So control backtick will take us here to week 9. We're going to go into our client folder, and we're going to do an ng serve -- open. You should know how to do this by this point. And I think this is a good workflow. ng serve, the -- open creates a browser sync, like we said last time. And right now what we have is this project where we can kind of navigate to different pages. The pages here are just placeholder pages. We can go to services and contact. These are all empty. When we go to books, you can see now that we have an empty books area. And the reason for this is because we haven't run our mock data backend. And the way to do that, again, is to open another PowerShell window and go into client and do an npm run JSON. And when we do that, it's going to run the backend. Notice that there are 2 endpoints. That's what these are called. One of them is called book list on port 3500. The other one is called orders. We don't have any orders yet. And if you go back out to the page now, and if we refresh, you can see now that we're going to have data. And this data is coming from our little mock server. By this week, by the end of this week, what we're going to do is going to have this data served up live from our MongoDB Atlas. That's where it's going to come from. Okay, and that means we're also going to put more of these books and authors, so that way we have a more realistic scenario in terms of the kind of books you can add to the bookstore. Okay, so you can see here we've got some actual numbers, and when we add to cart, it'll add the numbers correctly. That's what it does right now. If I add multiple items to the cart, it'll tell you how many items there are and the total cart value. Okay, but we can't actually see the cart, and that's what we want to do with this video. All right, getting back into it then. I'm just going to go back in here. And the first thing, and again, we're largely what we're doing at this point is following some of the things that we've talked about in the PowerPoint slides that are inside your module into week 9. Okay, so we're just modifying the cart and the slides. We're giving you another example. So instead of talking about a sports store, we're working with a bookstore, but the idea is the same. It's just different items and a different backend. Okay, slightly different way of doing things than what it shows you in the PowerPoints, and hopefully this is a good interactive video for you to understand some of the methods, the techniques we use to set things up, as well as dealing with problems, which is what we've shown you throughout the entire way. All right, so we're going to start with making a cart detail component, and we're going to put that inside the store folder. So again, going to client, we're going to go to the SRC folder, into app. We have a bookstore folder, and we're going to add a new component. We had cart summary. We're going to add a new component called cart detail. Okay, now in the PowerPoint, it just tells us to put it all into one folder, but we're going to make it so that it's a little bit more organized than that. So control backtick. Again, I'm going to go to my command line here. We'll add another command line, PowerShell. We're going to go into client. Again, you can add as many of these PowerShells within reason as you like. We're going to do an ng. Actually, let's go into the folder first. So cd, we're going to go to source app. There we go. You can see that we've got access now to the bookstores. We're going to say ng gc, and then we're going to go to the bookstore, book-store / and then the name of the component, which is going to be cart detail, and then press enter. And it's going to install a new component. It's also going to notice that it updated the store module, which is good for us. It does a lot of pre-work for us all at the same time. That's why generating and scaffolding is a really quick way of getting things done. We may have to modify stuff, but you can see now that we have cart detail. Let's take a look at that and see if we've got everything in place. And when I look at the PowerPoint right now, we have actually a cart detail component HTML. We're going to modify it so that it shows off what the template does in the PowerPoint. So div with a class of, by the way, for when you notice when I'm doing this stuff, I'm using Emmet, and I'm also make sure that you're in HTML down here. I think it's important. So div with a class of bg-info, and then a padding of 1 and text white. All right, so that is the div tag, and inside that div tag, we're going to have a temporary cart detail component, a placeholder. That's what this is going to show us. And it also says to put this actually inside of an H3 tag. So we'll just do that. We'll make it so that there's an H3 tag. And we're just going to move this in there. All right, so it kind of shows a little bigger. All right, so that is the cart detail component and the HTML file associated with it. Okay, so that's really all there is. Okay. We also need to make another component that we're going to put in the store called the checkout component. Okay, so again, we have cart detail, and we're going to have the checkout component. And again, this is going to be in its own folder, so I'm going to do the same thing. ng gc bookstore / and it's going to be called checkout component. Checkout. It's going to make a new folder called checkout. It's going to create a new component in the folder called checkout, and the checkout component is going to be very similar in detail. We're going to go into the checkout component HTML, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say a div tag with a class of actually I made a mistake with the last one. I'm going to fix that one. Div tag with, inside of that, there'll be an H3 with a class of background info, padding of 1 and text white. And inside there, you can actually do it inside of Emmet. You can put in the actual inner text, which is checkout component. And if you click on that once, you'll see everything as it's supposed to be. A lot of times what they show in the PowerPoint or up on the module is something that looks like this. Okay, so let's fix the other one, just because it's not exactly how we had it. Sorry, looking at the wrong one. This one should be, this class here should be actually in the h3 tag. There we go. So a few minor details that are slightly different, and we're going to save that. All right, so we're up to date with both the cart detail and the checkout component, both those components. And notice that in our bookstore module, both the cart detail and the checkout component have been added as declarations. All right. One thing we found out last video was that the only thing that goes in imports is modules. So we've got our module, model module, our browser module, our forms module, but we've got a bunch of declarations here, and we can decide whether we want to export these or not outside of this module. When we export them, then these other components become available in other places. For example, the cart detail component and the checkout component is only be available in this module, but not outside the module unless we put it in the exports array. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So cart detail component, checkout component is has the correct pathing, and we've included it in the declarations, and now we're going to include those two things as well in the export. So cart detail component as well as checkout component. Okay, so that's there. Okay, save that. And one thing else is very good to do is check to see that it's continuously compiling. If it doesn't compile properly, then it's a good idea to take a look at that as we go. So that way, as we're adding new components before we're configuring them, it's good to look and see that things are good. All right, so now that we've got all that happening, we want to make sure that our routing is going to work properly. So remember that we have that routing module. So let's go to that routing module. And this is app-routing module, right? And right now what we have is several different links. One of them is this book list. And we also want to go to, when we go to the cart, that is also going to be something that we want to get to. And for now, what we're going to say is that this module, which is including the bookstore, which is going to be this book list, right? Bookstore, as well as the cart and checkout is also going to be something that we're going to hit. Okay, so let's add those things in as well. And we'll add them here for now. We could make them sub items, but for now, let's just make them as full paths. So I'm just going to take this whole thing here. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go down and add a couple of more links. So the first link that we're going to add in here is going to be the cart. I'm going to call it cart link. So we'll call this, the title will be shopping cart. We're not using some of this right now because remember, only the items that use the data title are going to actually use any of this. Eventually we'll update it so we do. Okay, next. And the other thing that we're going to have is the checkout. Okay, checkout. Let's call it checkout for now. So we have those links, and now we have to have the proper components. Instead of the bookstore component in here, what we want to have instead is the cart detail component. That's for the cart. So cart detail component. You can see we're going to add that in. And that automatically adds another reference to the routing for the cart detail component. That's important. And then the other one is going to be for the checkout component. So we're going to call this the checkout component. It's this one. And that's going to add another reference to that. So we've got all the references we need to get to those places. And that's fantastic. The last thing we want to do is if I go to some other site, let's say a random site from a pathing perspective that has nothing to do with the bookstore, then, for example, I'll put in some other link for now. What I want to do is I want to say that, and this is something like a catch-all path. We can say that in case it goes somewhere else, then what we want to redirect to is to home for now. Okay, so that way it's going to go to home. In the PowerPoint, it says store, but actually we just don't. We don't want that. We want to redirect back to home. Okay. we can make this look differently, and when we get to the routing section of our video, we will update this a little bit to make a subpath, some subpaths, and we'll talk about how to do that. All right, cool. So we've got that going on, and what we want to do is we also want to test it out now and see if we get the proper routing happening. Okay, so again, going back to here, we want to refresh, and you can see now that we can still get to all this. We get to the books, and when I add to cart, it adds to cart, but now it lights up. And if I click on this, right, the idea is that we want to get some kind of action. Let's see what happens when we go there. So I'm going to inspect, and it looks like it's stuck there. Console says nothing happened. See, so we clicked onto it, and we're not showing anything right now. So it's going to the cart component, right? So again, if I hover over, we haven't updated this piece, the shopping cart itself, right? So if I hover over, you don't see an effect. In fact, if you hover over any of these buttons, typically what you'd expect is some kind of update to happen in the link, but there is no link update. All we're doing is we're adding to shopping cart, but right now our shopping cart's not working. It's just, we rerouted everything and we created all the back-end components so it works. All right, so we want to navigate between components, and so what we want to do with that is we're going to go to the bookstore component, and we've already added in the routing. And what we want to do is when we want to mention that inside of the store component, when we click the add book to cart, right, we want to navigate to the cart. That's what we want to do. Okay, so that's the next step. So we're going to go to the bookstore component, which is this one. And in here, what we want to do is inside of the constructor, we also want to take in a routing component. So we're going to go to private router, which is of type router. You can see that we can choose router. And router comes from Angular router, so that kind of comes in. A lot of times this is totally something we can work on to make sense, and we need a comma here. All right, so once we've done this, now we have access to something called, in the class, we have access to something called a router. One thing that students may ask sometimes is, so just because I put it in the constructor, how is it available in the rest of the code? Again, this is a shorthand for it being somewhere out here, right? What this means is, hey, I want a repository parameter, and I want to say that this dot repository is equal to, so another actual instance variable is equal to this repository that we're getting in the constructor. So as we go further down, we have this add book to cart scenario. And yes, we want to add the book to the line, the cart line, but we also want to navigate to the cart to show it. So we're going to say this dot router, and we're going to say navigate by URL. This is the case, and we're going to go /cart for now. Okay. And that gives us another way of moving to the cart. What we also want is that in the cart summary component, we want it to do something, because right now it doesn't do much. So we're going to go to cart summary. We're going to go to the HTML, and we're going to look at the cart summary component. And notice right now we have an item count and a cart price, and we also have a if it's empty or not. What we're going to do is we're going to add another button underneath the small tag, but inside the div. So we're going to say button, and inside of button, the button is going to be the class of button, button-small, background-dark, and then text-white. And inside that, we're going to have an I tag with a class of fa-shopping-cart, and that's the shopping cart symbol. And that's the button that we're going to have here. Notice that we kind of have this. Actually, let me just undo that change. What I meant is we actually put this button up here. We actually have this button already. But disabled, it says disabled is cart.item.count is equal to 0. And then we want to put a router link back to cart router link, right, which looks like this. Router link is equal to, and then what we want to do is, maybe we can put it there properly, where it's a separate item. Router link is equal to slash carts, and that kind of, this router link slash cart is actually the thing that's going to teleport us or transport us, navigate to the shopping cart. Everything else we already have, actually. And I noticed that when I started typing the button, I was like, wait, we already have the buttons up here. Okay, so that gives us what we need. We added the routing module to the store from before, because the routing module exists. We don't have to do it right now, if I'm not wrong. We may have to come back to it. But let's take a look and see what it actually does for us. So far it compiles nice. And what does this, how does this work up here? So again, I want to add to cart. And then as soon as I add to cart, I come to the cart detail. Immediately, as soon as I click the button, I come to the cart detail, right? We may not want this functionality later on. We may just be able to want to add to the cart. If I want to go back to books, and notice that the cart disappeared when I did that, right? So I will add to cart detail, but as soon as I go to another link, the cart's gone, right? What happened? One thing we want to try and do, maybe not this week, but the next week, is save the cart in local storage somewhere. So while we're working with it, it can remember, okay? And we'll talk about how to do that. All right, so that's so far what we have. We go to books, we add to cart, and once we add one item to the cart, we have this little placeholder. That's what we have right now. Okay, that's pretty good, but it's not really that fantastic, right? But that's what I want to do with this video. This video is just, hey, how do I make the cart detail? How do I add to cart detail? And how do I get to the cart detail? We're not actually showing the cart detail yet. We're going to get to that when we start doing things like creating root guards, as well as some of the other things that we're going to be talking about in the next video. All right, so recap. What did we do? So we added 2 more components, right? Both of them right now are placeholder components. One of them is called cart detail, and the other one is called cart summary. Cart detail, what it does right now is not much. It just says, hey, we're in the cart detail component. That's all it says. But the cart detail component and the cart summary component are both components that we can find in the bookstore component. Okay. We also created the routing for this ahead of time. So if you notice that we have cart and checkout, I can actually check the checkout area right now by going here and typing in the keyword checkout. We don't have a checkout link yet, but if I wanted to go there, we're going to see the checkout component nicely comes up. So we have a link for this. We can go to checkout, we can go to cart, and we can do these kind of things. So that's where we are right now. In the next video, we're going to add some routes to stop us from moving from one site to the next. We're going to talk about using something called a guard. It's a link guard, more or less, or a route guard. And what a route guard does is it really helps us control the routing system. So we can control where the user goes from different links. Okay, but for now, that's it for this video, and we'll see you in the next one.